What would you do if telling the truth cost you everything? Your career, your reputation, even the life you worked so hard to build. Amanda was known for her boldness, an attorney who never backed down and never held her tongue, but one night would change everything. Welcome to Threads of Grace, where stories of faith, truth, and transformation are woven together to remind us that God is always at work, even in the moments we don't understand. Now, enjoy the story. Amanda had a way of landing herself in trouble almost every time she opened her mouth. People rarely liked what she had to say, because she told the unadulterated truth, raw, direct, and unfiltered. Even as a child, that truth cost her. She was punished often, her mother insisting she didn't know her place. She didn't know when to stop. She didn't know when to soften. And most importantly, she didn't know how to say things in a way people could receive. But that same mouth, the one that got her in trouble, also opened doors. It won arguments. It commanded rooms. It earned her a seat at tables others spent years chasing. By 30, Amanda sat at the top of her firm, while men who had been there far longer still lingered on the sidelines. They tiptoed around the truth. They told their superiors what they wanted to hear. Amanda didn't, and that made her powerful. But power, she was beginning to realize, had a cost. Her boldness was a double-edged sword. It was the reason she was still single. The reason friendships never quite stuck. The reason people admired her, but kept their distance. And now, for the first time, Amanda didn't want that anymore. She didn't want to grow old alone. She didn't want success with no one to share it with. She didn't want a life without love, or the possibility of a child calling her mom. But how do you change something that has defined you your entire life? At 30, Amanda was set in her ways. She was used to control, used to getting what she wanted, used to demanding outcomes. Yet beneath all of that, she was hungry. Hungry for companionship, for softness, for something real. And she had no idea where to begin. She had one constant in her life, Toya. Toya had been there since elementary school, when everyone else turned their backs on Amanda. When classmates labeled her a snitch, a tattletale, a teacher's pet, Toya never joined in. She stayed. She defended her. She understood her. Now, Toya was an assistant principal, skilled in navigating difficult conversations with grace and precision. Ironically, she often credited Amanda for sharpening that skill. But Toya had something Amanda didn't. Balance. A thriving career. A loving husband. A life that felt whole. Toya, Amanda said one evening, stirring her drink, how did you find a good one so early? And I'm still here. Toya rolled her eyes with a knowing smile. Your time is coming, Amanda. Just don't rush it. Don't lower your standards. She paused, then added with a smirk. Just lower your tone. They both laughed, but Amanda felt the truth in it. Her tone. Too sharp. Too aggressive. Too much. She had mastered strength, but neglected softness. And while that strength built her career, it quietly dismantled her personal life. At 6 p.m., as usual, they met for dinner. Amanda spoke about closing deals, dismantling egos in boardrooms, and winning yet another battle. Toya shared stories of students, parents, and the daily balancing act of leadership and compassion. Together they laughed, vented, and exhaled. Then Toya paused. Amanda, do you see what I see? Across the room at the bar sat a man. Tall, composed, attractive in a way that didn't beg for attention, but commanded it. His double-breasted suit fit him like intention. Yet something about him felt heavy, like he was carrying the weight of the world in silence. Amanda glanced over. Yeah, she said casually. Toya leaned in. The good ones don't always come to you. Sometimes, you have to go to them. Amanda raised an eyebrow. So you're telling me to make the first move? Toya didn't answer. She just smiled and lifted her glass. That was enough. Amanda walked over. For once, not as the woman who commanded rooms, but as someone stepping into uncertainty. She sat beside him. He didn't look up at first, just shifted slightly to make space. Then, politely, he turned. Up close, he was even more striking. Almond-shaped hazel eyes. A calm, steady presence. A voice, deep and rich, that settled something in her chest she didn't know was restless. Stephen, he said, gently taking her hand, not to shake it, but to acknowledge her presence. Amanda smiled. Flirting wasn't her strength, but she tried. It looks like you're having one of those days, she said softly. Want to talk about it? And surprisingly, he did. Stephen didn't have many people. A brother with his own family. A best friend always traveling. A church acquaintance when schedules aligned. But no one consistent. No one safe. And tonight he needed that. I had to decide today, he began, voice heavy, whether to tell a mother that our company may have contributed to her child's condition, or to stay within the lines of what we're allowed to disclose. Amanda's instincts kicked in. As an attorney, she knew this territory. Dangerous. Sensitive. But how do you stop someone from talking who finally feels heard? I walk that line every day, Stephen continued. Then paused. I don't even know your name. Amanda, she said. Amanda Claims. Recognition flashed across his face. He had heard that name before. And suddenly, he realized he may have said too much. Amanda noticed the shift. No worries, she said calmly. We're not at work. And if anything ever crossed my desk, this conversation would make it a conflict of interest. That was all he needed. The tension dissolved. What followed felt effortless. They talked about childhood, missed opportunities, past relationships that almost became forever, but didn't. Time slipped. When Toya saw the connection forming, she quietly excused herself, leaving Amanda exactly where she needed to be. With possibility. The next morning, Amanda woke up different. Not changed, but awakened and filled with possibility. For the first time in a long time, she didn't just feel powerful. She felt hopeful. Amanda's co-workers noticed the shift immediately. There was something softer about her, something lighter. She said good morning, and meant it. She held the door open for others. In the boardroom, she allowed space for others to speak, resisting the urge to interrupt or dismantle every flawed idea that crossed the table. For once, she didn't need to dominate the room to feel in control. At lunchtime, instead of working through her cases, Amanda stepped away. She walked to a nearby deli, ordered a simple sandwich, and took her time eating it. No emails. No calls. Just a quiet moment to herself. She strolled back to the office just in time for the afternoon briefing. And in that meeting, she wasn't the loudest voice. She was simply present. She contributed when asked. She listened more than she spoke. And surprisingly, she still felt effective, perhaps even more so. But what truly carried her through the day was the anticipation waiting at the other end of it. Stephen. They had plans, an official date, and the thought of it filled her with a calm, steady excitement she hadn't felt in years. That evening, they met at Stephen's favorite Italian restaurant. The moment they walked in, it was clear he was well known there. Staff greeted him warmly, smiles exchanged like old friends. He was led to a quiet, intimate booth, slightly tucked away from the rest of the dining room. You'll be dining with company tonight, a beautiful young waitress said with a knowing smile. Stephen nodded, gently taking Amanda's hand in his, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The gesture didn't feel performative. It felt intentional. Their conversation picked up where it had left off, easy, unforced, and full of life. This time it was lighter, filled with laughter and curiosity. What if you could retire today? Stephen asked. What would you do? Amanda smiled. Travel. Everywhere. No agenda. Just explore. And what if you already had a family? He continued. What would that look like? She paused, picturing it. Peaceful. Full. Structured but warm. Stephen chuckled. And which parent would be the favorite? Amanda smirked. Obviously me. They laughed. What if you were nominated for a prestigious award? She asked. What would it be and why? The questions kept coming, playful, revealing, layered. And with each what if, they uncovered more than hypothetical answers. They uncovered values, desires, dreams they hadn't said out loud in a long time. And somewhere between the laughter and the lingering glances, it became clear, this wasn't just conversation. It was connection. Here's a continuation that introduces a strong turning point and legal conflict while maintaining the emotional and narrative flow. The waiter had just cleared their plates when the tone of the evening shifted. It was subtle at first. Stephen's phone buzzed once. Then again. Then a third time, longer this time, more insistent. He glanced down at the screen, and Amanda watched it happen. The ease in his face tightened. His jaw set. His shoulders, once relaxed, squared with quiet tension. Everything okay? Amanda asked gently. Stephen hesitated. For a moment, it looked like he might dismiss it. Brush it off. Stay present. But something in him knew he couldn't. I need to take this, he said, standing. Amanda nodded. Of course. She watched as he stepped away, his voice low but urgent as he answered the call near the entrance. At first, she tried not to listen. But then, you told her what? Stephen's voice sharpened. A pause. No, that's not what we agreed to disclose. Another pause. Do you understand what this does to liability? Amanda's chest tightened. The words were familiar. Too familiar. She turned her gaze away, suddenly very aware of the space between who she was professionally and who she was becoming personally. Stephen ran a hand through his hair. No, don't release anything else. I'm coming in. He ended the call. And just like that, the night was no longer theirs. When he returned to the table, his expression was apologetic. But distant. I'm so sorry, he said. Something's come up at work. Amanda gave a small, understanding smile. I figured. He exhaled, sitting down but not fully settling. There's a situation developing, he continued carefully. And it's sensitive. Amanda nodded slowly. She could feel it now. The shift. Not just in the night, but in everything. Stephen, she said, her tone measured. Does this situation involve what you mentioned yesterday? He froze. Not dramatically. But enough. Enough for her to know. There it was. The line. The one neither of them had planned to cross, but somehow already had. Stephen leaned back slightly, studying her now, not as a woman he was getting to know, but as something else. A variable. Amanda, what exactly do you know about that situation? He asked carefully. Her heart beat a little faster, but her face remained composed. Only what you shared, she said. And even that I didn't ask for. Silence settled between them. Not awkward. Heavy. Stephen nodded slowly, but the ease from earlier was gone. You're an attorney, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And if something like this were to escalate, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to be involved, Amanda finished calmly. It would be a conflict of interest. She held his gaze. Professional. Clear. But inside she felt the crack. Because for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to walk away from something before it even began. Stephen looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, this isn't small, Amanda. I didn't think it was. There are decisions being made right now that could affect a lot of people. I know. Another pause. And if this turns into what I think it might, he continued, there's a chance we could end up on opposite sides of it. That landed. Not like a blow, but like a truth. Amanda let out a slow breath. Well, she said softly, that would be complicated. Stephen almost smiled. Yeah, that's one word for it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The laughter from earlier felt like it belonged to another night. Another version of them. And yet, neither of them moved to leave. Finally, Amanda leaned forward slightly. Let me ask you something, she said. Okay. If none of that existed, no cases, no companies, no conflicts. She paused, searching his face. Would you still be sitting here? Stephen didn't hesitate. Yes. That was enough. For now. Amanda nodded, a quiet resolve settling in. Then I guess we'll just have to figure out how to navigate both, she said. Stephen studied her, really studied her this time. Not just as Amanda the attorney, but Amanda the woman who was trying to be something more. Carefully, he replied, because what neither of them said out loud was that this wasn't just a potential case anymore. It was a collision course between truth, power, and something neither of them had expected to find. Here's the next section, weaving in betrayal, internal conflict, and rising stakes. The email came in at 8:12 a.m. Subject line, urgent, new case assignment. Amanda clicked it without hesitation, coffee still warm in her hand. By the second sentence, her stomach dropped. By the third, she stopped breathing. Pharmaceutical liability case. Potential prenatal impact. High-profile client. And then the company name. It was Stevens. Amanda leaned back slowly in her chair, the weight of the moment settling over her like a storm rolling in. This wasn't coincidence. This was collision. Within minutes, her office phone rang. Boardroom. Now. It was Daniel, senior partner. When Amanda walked in, every seat at the table was filled. The air was charged, expectant. They were excited. Too excited. This is the kind of case that defines a firm, Daniel began, pacing slightly. National attention. Corporate accountability. Big numbers. Another partner leaned in. And we want you leading it, Amanda. Of course they did. She was the one who didn't flinch. The one who dismantled arguments without mercy. The one who won. Amanda felt every eye on her. Waiting. Trusting. Counting on her. She opened her mouth, and for the first time in her career, nothing came out. Amanda. Daniel pressed. She swallowed. There's something I need to disclose. The room stilled. I had a conversation last night, she began carefully, with someone connected to this case. A pause. How connected? Another partner asked sharply. Amanda held her ground. close enough that continuing forward would be a conflict of interest. Silence. Then disbelief. "You're stepping back?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. "Yes. On this case." "Yes." A scoff came from across the table. "You've got to be kidding me." "Amanda, do you understand what you're walking away from?" Another added. She did. That was the problem. "This isn't just any case," Daniel continued, frustration rising. "We built this firm on moments like this. And you, of all people, you're telling us you can't proceed because of a conversation?" Amanda's voice remained calm but firm. "It's more than a conversation." "What is it then?" someone challenged. And there it was. The line she couldn't fully explain. Without saying too much. Without exposing Stephen. Without exposing herself. "It's enough," she said simply. "And ethically I can't take it." The room shifted. Respect. Replaced with irritation. Confidence. Replaced with doubt. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at her directly. "I need you to understand something, Amanda. When you step away from something of this magnitude, it doesn't just reflect on you. I know, but we have 9 other highly successful and capable lawyers in this firm. I am sure that I am not the only one that this company's back has been built on." Amanda spoke firmly and unapologetically. "That's true." Another partner leaned forward, voice low and cutting. "Is there something else going on here that we all need to know about, Amanda? Are you not competent and capable to take this case on yourself?" Amanda retorted, but didn't answer. That was answer enough. The meeting ended without resolution, but not without consequence. As Amanda walked out, she could feel it. The shift. The same way people once admired her boldness. Now they questioned her judgment. Back in her office, she closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. Her phone buzzed. A text. "Stephen, I'm hearing things are moving fast. Are you okay?" Amanda stared at the message. So much had changed in less than 24 hours. Her career, her reputation, her relationships within the firm, all now hanging in the balance. Because of him. Because of them. Her phone rang before she could respond. "Toya. Girl. What did you do?" Toya's voice came through, half concerned, half knowing. Amanda let out a breath. "My firm got the case." A pause. "And?" "I turned it down." Silence. Not shock. Understanding. "That big, huh?" Toya finally said. Amanda closed her eyes. "It's bigger than I thought." "And him?" Toya asked carefully. Amanda hesitated. Then, "He's right in the middle of it." Another pause. Then Toya said what Amanda already knew, but didn't want to face. "Well, now you're not just dating him." She inhaled slowly. "You're tied to him." Amanda opened her eyes, staring out at the city she once felt she controlled. For the first time, she wasn't sure what came next. Because in choosing integrity, in choosing something personal over something powerful, she may have just betrayed the very thing that built her. And the real question now was, would it cost her everything? The firm didn't wait. By noon, the case had already been assigned. Amanda found out the same way everyone else did, through an internal memo. Lead counsel. Daniel Reeves. By 2 p.m., the energy in the office had shifted. People spoke in lower tones when she passed. Conversations paused. Doors that once stayed open were now partially closed. Amanda wasn't being confronted. "They're asking for you," she said. "Conference room B." Inside the firm, it was worse. Conversations stopped when she walked by. Emails became formal. Eyes that once held admiration now carried caution. And curiosity. And then, Amanda walked into the largest conference room in the building, every seat filled, every eye already searching for her. Daniel stood at the front, composed but visibly strained. Amanda felt it, the shift from we to her. "We are addressing a matter that has now become public," he began. "Transparency and integrity are the foundation of this firm. An internal review has confirmed that one of our senior attorneys had direct contact with a key individual connected to this case prior to its assignment." A pause. There it was. No shield. No soft landing. Amanda stood still. Not defensive. Not reactive. Just still. That hurt more than anything. When the meeting ended, no one approached her. No one defended her. No one asked her if she was okay. She walked back to her office alone, closed the door, and for the first time in a long time, Amanda sat in silence. Without a strategy. Her phone buzzed. Messages. Notifications. Missed calls. Media requests. Colleagues. Unknown numbers. Stephen. And then, something unfamiliar rose in her chest. Not anger. Not fear. But surrender. God, she whispered, her voice barely steady. I don't know how to fix this. The words felt foreign. She had built her life on fixing things, controlling outcomes, winning. But this was bigger than strategy, bigger than intellect, bigger than her. She inhaled deeply, then exhaled. Slow. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to defend herself. She felt the need to stand. Her phone buzzed again. This time she picked it up. Stephen. She answered. Amanda. His voice came through strained. I saw the reports. It's going exactly where it's supposed to. Heavy. There are things being covered, he admitted. Things that, if they come out, won't just affect the company. Amanda's grip tightened on the phone. It'll affect me. There it was. Amanda closed her eyes briefly. Not in fear, but in recognition. This wasn't just professional anymore. This was moral. Stephen, she said, her voice calm but anchored, whatever is hidden will come to light. He didn't respond. And when it does, she continued, you're going to have to decide who you are in that moment. Silence filled the line. Because for the first time, Amanda wasn't speaking as the sharpest attorney in the room. She was speaking from somewhere deeper. And it carried weight. I don't want to lose you in this, Stephen said quietly. Amanda's eyes softened. Then don't lose yourself. Another silence. But this one felt like a crossroads. When the call ended, Amanda didn't rush. Didn't react. Didn't strategize. She simply stood. Because whatever came next would test everything. Her career. Her reputation. Her relationship. Her truth. But this time, she wouldn't face it alone. Stephen didn't sleep that night. The city outside his window moved as it always did, cars passing, lights flickering, life continuing. But inside his apartment, everything felt still. Heavy. Amanda's words replayed in his mind. Whatever is hidden will come to light. Don't lose yourself. He sat at his kitchen table, a folder spread open in front of him. Documents. Internal memos. Email threads he was never supposed to keep. Proof. Proof that the company had known. Not everything, but enough. Enough to question. Enough to warn. Enough to act. And they didn't. Stephen leaned back, pressing his palms against his eyes. For years, he had told himself the same thing. You're not the decision-maker. You're just the messenger. You stay within the lines. But the lines had blurred. And now they were gone. His phone buzzed. CEO, incoming call. Stephen stared at it. Let it ring once. Twice. Then he answered. Stephen, the voice on the other end was smooth, controlled. I trust you've seen the situation unfolding. Yes. There are narratives forming, the CEO continued. And your role right now is critical in shaping how this is received. You've always been excellent at walking that line, the CEO added. Saying enough. Without saying too much. The air shifted. You've built a very successful career here, Stephen, the CEO continued, voice lowering slightly. We value loyalty. Loyalty. Stephen looked down at the documents on his table. At the names. At the data. At the reality behind the language they were preparing to soften. And what about responsibility? Stephen asked. Another pause. This one colder. Our responsibility, the CEO replied, is to the company. To our stakeholders. To ensuring stability. Not to the truth. Not to the people affected. Stephen swallowed. You're asking me to stand in front of this, he said slowly. And, what? Redirect? Reframe. We're asking you to do your job. Silence. Because suddenly Stephen realized something. His job. And his values. Were no longer on the same side. I'll review the statement, Stephen said finally. Good, the CEO replied. And Stephen, a pause. Make the smart choice. The line went dead. Stephen sat there unmoving. Smart choice. He had spent his entire career making the smart choice. Strategic. Calculated. Safe. But now, the smart choice felt like the wrong one. His phone buzzed again. This time Amanda. He stared at her name. Then answered. Hey, he said, quieter now. Hey, she replied. I won't keep you long. He almost laughed. Everything in his life was unraveling, and she was still considerate. I think I'm about to be put in a position, he said, where I have to choose. Amanda didn't rush to fill the silence. Between what? She asked gently. Stephen exhaled. Between protecting my career, he said, or telling the truth. There it was. Out loud. Amanda closed her eyes briefly. Not in surprise, but in understanding. Those are never easy choices, she said. No, he admitted. But this one feels final. Another pause. What happens if you tell the truth? She asked. Stephen let out a dry breath. I lose everything I've built. And if you don't? That answer came faster. I lose myself. Silence. Deep. Unavoidable. Amanda's voice softened but carried weight. Then the choice is already made. Stephen's chest tightened, because she was right, but knowing the answer didn't make it easier to live with. They're expecting me to stand behind a statement, he said. One that isn't fully honest. Amanda leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. Then don't. It was simple. Clear. Uncompromising. You say that like it won't cost me anything, he said. I didn't say that, she replied. It will cost you. A pause. But not more than it would cost you to live a lie. Stephen ran a hand through his hair. You really believe that? He asked. Amanda didn't hesitate. Yes. Because now her faith wasn't just something she turned to in private. It was something she stood on. Truth has a way of shaking things, she continued. But it also has a way of setting things right. Stephen looked out at the city again. But this time silence. Then resolve. Okay, he said quietly. And in that moment he knew. The next time he spoke publicly, it wouldn't be to protect the company. It would be to tell the truth. No matter what it cost him. This was a reckoning. Behind the curtain, Stephen adjusted his tie for the third time. Not out of vanity. Out of nerves. His reflection stared back at him in the small mirror nearby. Composed. Polished. Controlled. The same image he had presented to the world for years. A staff member approached quietly. They're ready for you. Paused. Looked out at the sea of faces waiting to dissect every word. For a brief moment he considered it. The statement they had prepared. The safe version. The version that would protect everything he had built. Good afternoon, he began. His voice was steady. Grounded. Different. I stand before you today not just as a representative of my company. A pause. But as a man accountable for the role I've played within it. Pens moved faster. For some time, I have been part of the team responsible for communicating information related to this product. He swallowed. There were moments, critical moments, where more could have been said. I am saying, he replied, that the full truth was not always communicated as clearly, or as urgently, as it should have been. Gasps. Murmurs. Phones lifted. But I can speak to this. When you are in a position where truth and protection begin to conflict. The longer you delay choosing truth, the greater the harm becomes. More questions fired. Will you testify? Are others involved? Is this a cover-up? Stephen raised his hand slightly. Not to silence them, but to center himself. There are families, he said, his voice lowering, who are asking questions they deserve answers to. Amanda's face crossed his mind. Not as distraction, but as grounding. They deserve clarity, he continued. They deserve honesty. And they deserve accountability. The room erupted again. But Stephen didn't flinch. Because in that moment, he had already lost what he feared losing. Control. Position. Protection. But what he gained was something he hadn't felt in a long time. Back in her office, Amanda watched the broadcast. Every word. Every pause. Every decision. And when it ended, she didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. But tonight, something in him refused to cooperate. There was no compartment big enough to hold what he was feeling. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the weight of the moment pressing in. A pause. And without hesitation, he picked up the statement. And tore it in half. He was letting go of the version of himself that had learned to survive. By avoiding truth. I couldn't say what they wanted me to say. He was anchored in what he had chosen. Amanda. Daniel's voice was clipped, controlled. We need you in court. The words settled slowly. She wore no armor today. No sharp edges. No need to dominate. That's her. No cameras. No case. No pressure. Just the quiet understanding of two people who had made the same choice, at great cost. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Certain. Aligned. The cameras captured it instantly. Flash. 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 A reporter pushed forward. Are you two connected to this case together? Another reporter shouted. Are you prepared for the consequences of this? Because at this point, the consequences were already in motion. Relationships fractured. Amanda turned slightly toward Stephen. Not for reassurance, but in recognition. Not as attorney and corporate representative. Not as two people caught on opposite sides of a case. Wouldn't just be a legal battle. The courtroom was full. Not just with attorneys and reporters, but with anticipation. Amanda sat at the witness stand, hands folded calmly in her lap. The very people who had once trusted her judgment without question. Ms. Claims, opposing counsel began, pacing slowly. You are a seasoned attorney, correct? Yes. You've built your reputation on precision, strategy, and, if I may, control. And yet, he continued, in one of the most significant cases your firm has taken on, you chose to step away. The attorney turned slightly toward the jury. So let me understand this, he said. You are asking this court to believe that after years of professional discipline, you suddenly allowed a personal relationship to interfere with your responsibilities? Intentional, he pressed. To walk away from the biggest case of your career? The moment. For a long time, she began, her voice steady but softer than before, I believed that success meant always having the answer. Always being the strongest voice in the room. Always winning. But somewhere along the way, I realized that being right legally and being right morally are not always the same thing. Your faith, he repeated. I believe that integrity matters, even when no one is watching, and especially when it costs you something. And in that moment, she said, my faith reminded me that I am not just accountable to a firm or a title. The weight of her words settled over the room. Ms. Claims, with all due respect, this court operates on law, not personal belief. Amanda nodded. And I respect that, she said. But my decisions are guided by both. And because of that, she continued, I chose not to put myself in a position where my presence, even unintentionally, could compromise the integrity of this case. Amanda exhaled slowly as she stepped down from the stand. No gestures. Defense calls Stephen Wright. A ripple moved through the room. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but if they were, every lens would have been locked on him. Stephen stood. For a brief moment, he adjusted his jacket, not out of nerves but out of habit. Then he walked forward. Not as the polished spokesperson. Not as the protector of a company. But as a man who had already decided he would not lie again. He was sworn in. Sat down. Hands steady. Eyes clear. Mr. Wright, defense counsel began. Can you state your role at the company? Managing public communication, Stephen said. Shaping messaging. Particularly in moments of crisis. Mr. Wright, are you aware of the allegations being brought against your company? And based on your knowledge, did the company knowingly release harmful products to the public? To Amanda, the word echoed louder than it should have. They were not disclosed with the urgency or clarity they deserved. There were opportunities to communicate more transparently, he said. To issue stronger warnings. To prioritize caution. There was concern about liability. About public perception. About financial impact. And what was your role in that? The attorney asked. I helped shape the messaging that followed. Is worth losing your soul. But in alignment. The courtroom was silent. Not the ordinary quiet of procedure, but the kind that settles when something deeper has taken hold. The jury sat still. 12 individuals. Different backgrounds. Different lives. Yet now bound together by one responsibility. To decide what truth required. We've had expert witnesses. Analysts. Specialists, he said. A few heads nodded. But we can't base our decision on emotion, juror number 6 interjected. We have to look at the facts. Neither of them gained anything from telling the truth. Juror number 6 leaned back, considering. So what are we saying? He asked. That because they believe in something, we should just accept everything they said. Silence. And we further find that the evidence presented, including testimony provided under oath, demonstrates a failure to disclose known risks in a manner consistent with public safety. Because they understood something the room was just beginning to process. The courthouse steps were quieter now. The cameras had thinned. The crowd had shifted. The story had already begun to move on. But Amanda and Stephen were just beginning to understand what had happened. They didn't speak right away. They simply walked. Side by side. No urgency. No destination. For once, there was nothing to defend. Nothing to prove. Nothing to fight. I didn't think it would feel like this, Stephen said finally. He exhaled slowly. Not victory, he said. Not relief exactly. A pause. They walked a few more steps. Now I'm trying to figure out who I am. Without it. Then Stephen asked the question that had been sitting beneath everything. We can build something based on everything we just survived. Or we can build something based on who we're becoming. Not in chaos. Not in conflict. But in alignment. Stephen reached for her hand. Not rushed. Not uncertain. Intentional. Amanda didn't pull away. And this time it didn't feel like a beginning built on chance. It felt like something chosen. Something that had already been tested, and remained. Dinner? Stephen asked quietly. Amanda smiled. Only if it's somewhere with no reporters, she replied. And as they walked away, no cameras. No noise. Just two people, learning that love built on truth didn't have to be loud to be lasting. Thank you for taking the time to watch this story on Threads of Grace. Stories like this remind us that truth, faith, and integrity still matter, even when it's hard, even when it costs something. If this message spoke to you in any way, I'm truly grateful you were here to experience it. Now I'd love to hear from you. What part of the story stayed with you the most? Have you ever had to choose between what was easy and what was right? Drop a word, a thought, or even just truth in the comments if this message resonated with you.